Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm Anna Richards, Manager of Programs and Events with the Greater Akron Chamber, and your Zoom producer extraordinaire. We want to thank you for joining us and go over just a few quick Zoom house rules, if you will. We will encourage you to turn your videos on so we can see your faces if you're able, but we will ask that you keep yourselves muted when you're not speaking to help everyone have a little bit of a better experience. Today, for any questions or comments that you have for our speakers, we ask that you put them into the chat, and we'll be monitoring the chat and getting those questions to the speakers. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jolene to take us away.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jolene Lane, and I am currently the principal and founder of Equity Lane LLC, which is a diversity, equity, inclusion strategy consulting firm, which is relatively new for me. And I'm having a wonderful time and feeling like I have the opportunity to make some good impact in the greater Akron area around diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's my pleasure, and on behalf of the Athena Akron board and my co-chair, Jacqueline, Jacqueline Palumbo, who's on the call as well. We are happy to present the state of the women's community. This is a collaboration between Athena Akron and Women's Network. It's an initiative that has traditionally been an Athena Akron initiative, and we are trying to transition it into a new format where we are going to address multiple issues that impact the state of the women's community over the next 12 months. And so this is our inaugural meeting. This particular session will be about women's mental health. We thought it important to begin with that, given the times that we're in and perhaps the different types of issues that many of us women and our families have had to face through pandemic and quarantine and many other things that have happened in our community, in our world. And so these conversations are designed to be educational, informative, and inspirational. And we hope to connect and empower women and men from our complementary networks, accentuate the mission of leadership development central to both of these women's organizations. And we expect that the series will be a touchstone and provide a source of support for the full spectrum of issues concerning women of all ages and stages. So with that, I would like to first introduce Jan Conrad, who is currently the Women's Network Leadership Institute Director at the Greater Akron Chamber. She's been involved in leading and growing business startups for over 30 years. And with those efforts with organizations such as the Ohio State University, where she directed the build out and launch of their state-of-the-art facility on their Worcester campus. She has also worked extensively in Florida and facilitated the launch of the Community Resources Center grant funded by the Department of Labor for NASA workers at the Kennedy Space Center. Upon her return to Ohio in 2015, she launched the SBA-funded Women's Business Center inside the Economic Community Development Institute. And in her role as director, she assisted women entrepreneurs through business coaching and program leadership. And during her tenure, she coached more than 450 women in various stages of business and facilitated connections for more than $2 million in business capital, many of which were under $50,000 each. In 2018, she was named Executive Director of Women's Network, and that was rebranded as the Women's Network Leadership Institute inside the Greater Akron Chamber. The mission of the Women's Network Leadership Institute is to connect, inspire, and empower women through thought leadership, research, and best-in-class leadership development. Jan has just announced that she is going to be leaving that role and launching her own consulting business. So we're excited for her and her new venture that's going to begin in, I think, about a week or so. Mm-hmm. And so with that, I want to introduce Jan and allow her to say a little bit about leadership and how we're connecting the Athena Akron mission with the Women's Network mission and looking at leaders in the community around these various topics that we're addressing.
Well, thank you, Jolene. I appreciate that introduction, and it is so good to see so many familiar faces here tonight. I'm so excited to be a part of this program. I think it's a wonderful collaboration. And I think it sends just a great message to our community that together we are collaborating and we are pressing forward and keeping some of these topics at the forefront of conversation, which are so important to women, but also to our community at large. And I want to really just thank Jacqueline and Jolene for inviting us to be a part of that. I want to thank the Athena board for supporting that. And I think this is going to be a great year of learning in a way that we can dig a little deeper, have an hour with these special guests that we have, and really learn some things that we can do to make an impact in our little sphere of influence. So when Jolene asked me to make a few comments tonight, she asked me to speak on leadership. And as I thought about leadership, you know, that's really like such a broad term, and it means so many things to so many different people. In our organization, you know, we did a gender equity and women's leadership study on Summit County specifically. And so in that context, leadership was all about data and kind of who runs what in Summit County. So I'm going to share a couple of those just because this is just one piece of leadership that I think is important to think about. And then I'm going to share with you of how I'm thinking about this leadership for this evening. So, you know, if we look at leadership just in terms of what the data says, women are underrepresented in corporate leadership to a greater degree than that at the national level. We know that based on the data that the research we did in 2018. We know that in Summit County, nonprofit organizations are powered by women and led by men. Not the greatest data to share, not great news necessarily. And then we recognize that disparity on boards it's not just enough to study it and find out what it is. It has to be very intentional. And there was a wonderful example of that in Summit County some years back when the women got together and decided they were going to vote for women judges. And if you look at Summit County, we have a tremendous track record for women judges, and we are, you know, really unique in this county. I don't know any other county in the state, and I don't even know in the country that has as many women judges as what we do here in Summit County. One other kind of downer that I'm going to share with you, because I do think it's important to know what the landscape is. In Summit County, when we look at the C-suite leaders in organizations, in businesses, particularly in this case, this is a statistic for just the private sector. In private sector businesses, men in the C-suite make up 82% of leadership, and that was as of 2018. And I doubt that it's changed a whole lot since then. Some, but not a whole lot. Men of color make up 2% of men in the C-suite. Women make up 15%, and women of color make up 1%. So those are some statistics that are pretty startling, and you know, things that our organization works to address through our foundational courses on strength-based leadership. But as I looked at leadership in another way and thought about the kind of leadership that I think we as women can hold and have and share no matter what our position is, and that's the leadership of influence. And I'd like to talk about that just a little bit. When I think about people who impacted me in my life and who helped me decide what I wanted to be and helped me understand what I could be, they weren't necessarily CEOs, executives, or people in a C-suite, but they were people who were women like my junior high school English teacher, who taught me to dissect sentences and told me that I could be a great writer. She was a woman of influence, not in a position necessarily of leadership, but as Webster defines leadership, leadership is a person of influence. I think about a college professor who told me that I should pursue a business degree because she could see that I had a love of how businesses worked. And she was not necessarily a leader and didn't have a big title, but she was a person of influence. So as I look tonight at who we are going to hear from, I was so impressed with these women that are going to share their knowledge on mental health with us. And as I think about us as an audience tonight, I believe every one of us can be a person of influence as we learn more tonight about something that we know is so prevalent in our community. So I want to say thank you, Jolene, for the opportunity to share. Thank you to our speakers, and thank you to all of you for being here. And I look forward to hearing what they have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan. It's wonderful to have you sort of set the tone around leadership, around these important topics. And as we launch into our first topic of women's mental health, it's really important to note that this very strong network of women in the Akron area. It's such a pleasure for me to just ask and have people say, yes, of course, I want to be a part of this great initiative. So with that, I would like to introduce our first guest. Our format is going to be that each of our three guests will share a little bit about the work that they do. And then afterwards, after the three of them have had the chance to speak, we will open for questions. I'll pose a question or two, and then we'll be open for questions by the audience as well. So if you have questions, again, please feel free to put them in the chat. Our first guest is Dr. Tania Lodge. She's the program director of Minority Behavioral Health Group, which is an African-centered community mental health agency in Akron. She specializes in providing culturally specific mental health services, program development and evaluation, professional development, and continuing education workshops on cultural competency and African-centered healing approaches. She's a staff psychologist as well at the Family Services Coordinator at the Lewis Stokes Cleveland Veteran Affairs Medical Center, in which she oversees and coordinates the Family and Couples Specialty Mental Health Clinic. And she also teaches doctoral level courses part-time at the University of Akron. She has 18 years of clinical experience and extensive knowledge and experience developing and evaluating programs and African-centered healing approaches. And she's also an active member of the Association of Black Psychologists, where she serves on the board of directors as the Midwestern Regional Representative and co-chair for the Subana Virtual Healing Circles. So with that, I welcome Dr. Tania Lodge.
Thank you. And thank you for the committee for this invitation to come and speak tonight about something that I find to be very important and significant, and I'm very passionate about. I can spend hours speaking about mental health, but I'm just going to speak briefly about the work that I'm doing, and particularly focus on trauma and the impact that trauma has on our overall mental health. I am the program director at Minority Behavioral Health Group. Essentially what that means is I oversee the program in terms of the evaluation to determine how effective it is. So MBHG is a community mental health agency that really focuses on providing culturally specific mental health services. And that's important, especially for women of color, when we look at the research and the data that highlights the underutilization of mental health services. And then when you think about the stressors and the mental health and overall well-being of women and the things that we often encounter and are subjected to, it is striking that we are less likely to engage in therapy. And sometimes when we do, we terminate prematurely because the services that we're receiving does not necessarily meet the needs that we have. Meaning there's a lack of cultural awareness or consideration for cultural context that is interjected into the treatment so that we can fully embrace what we're experiencing, feel validated in those experiences, and be able to heal whatever that process might look like for individuals. So my role at MBHG is to really evaluate the program. However, before stepping into this role, I served as the clinical director, where my role was to provide clinical oversight, clinical training, and clinical service delivery to the community. And essentially, what we would see is a lot of trauma that people in the community are experiencing. And oftentimes, trauma is not considered, it's not assessed for. We don't necessarily talk about it. Sometimes we talk about the experiences that we have, but we don't know that that's trauma. All we know is how we're responding and how we are interacting with others as a result of that trauma. So because trauma often goes undetected, that means we end up with misdiagnoses or diagnoses that does not necessarily fit or has other implications as it relates to how our women will access resources, community resources. Will they be able to get a job? Will they be able to participate in certain things that they may not have ability to do given whatever their mental health conditions might be? So my job and role, and what I spend a lot of time making sure, is that we are able to provide information, education around mental health. I think that awareness is something that allows people to feel more open and comfortable with engaging in resources that are available. Making sure that the services are geared towards people's life experiences, whatever those experiences might be. When you think about the pandemic, the entire world, country, has been impacted by the pandemic. It has been a pretty traumatic experience. And so it's no wonder that we see people more likely engaging in resources. However, what we tend to see are things like addiction. And we saw a rise in child abuse and neglect. We saw a rise in intimate partner violence. We saw a rise in interpersonal violence. And we saw some very negative ways that people were attempting to cope. And a lot of this significantly impacted women in particular. What we don't always consider, and we tend to focus on those behavioral responses, but we don't necessarily have a accurate assessment of exactly what is presenting. And the reason that is important, because it does drive what we do, how we think about it, and what it is that we do. And so making sure that we have a process where we can allow people to express their experiences in a way that they feel heard, that they feel validated, that it doesn't continue to increase or perpetuate stigma, then it allows people to be able to receive and benefit from those resources. So a lot of work that I've been doing recently has been connected to the Infant Mortality Initiative. And I'm not sure how many of us present tonight is aware, but the rate of infant mortality deaths before the age of 1 in our community is significantly high, and particularly for African-American women. And so doing some research and putting together resources and programming around why are our women delivering babies early, and why are our babies dying before they reach the age of 1, again, providing that behavioral support, that consultation and that information to community partners allow women to be able to, again, get into situations where they can understand what their experiences are and how this trauma is manifesting into mental health disorders. And that's the point that I want to make tonight, is when trauma goes undetected, unacknowledged, not considered, it does manifest in other ways, in other mental distress that we see. And because we tend to focus more on those symptoms, what I would call of trauma, then we have a very difficult time of providing holistic care and resources that women are going to be amenable to and open to receiving. So the work that I'm doing across the board, whether I am at Minority Behavioral Health Group, whether I am at the Cleveland VA, is all centered around how trauma impacts us mentally and how we experience trauma and what is necessary for us to accurately assess that impact, and then put programming and resources in place where we can begin to have productive conversations and then treatment modalities that's going to be effective. As a program director, a large part of my job is to look at the effectiveness of the programming that is available and how those services are being delivered and how our women are receiving those services. The research will tell us that women underutilize services, but the programs that I work with specifically, we have a waiting list. So it's not that women are underutilizing, but women oftentimes are misdiagnosed with things. Again, we're mothers, we work jobs. There's things that we have to have access to or be able to demonstrate in order to have a livelihood. And when those things are threatened, by diagnoses that are not consistent with our experiences, it causes other problems. And then we have women and men and people in general not utilizing the services that are there for them to be able to heal and survive the different things that are happening. The cultural healing spaces is another opportunity that I would like to talk about. As the Midwestern Regional Rep for the Association of Black Psychologists, again, the services that are being highlighted is understanding the impact of trauma, in particular racial trauma. So not only did we have the pandemic, but what we experienced was racial trauma, police brutality, and all these things that happen throughout social media. The pandemic pretty much increased everybody's ability or willingness to engage on social media platforms because we were isolated. So that was a plus, right? Well, we can't connect with everybody because we have social distancing and we need to protect ourselves. So we connect through social media platforms where there's a lot of misinformation that took place during social media. And there is data that suggests that social media actually increases mental distress due to the misinformation about what is happening in our communities, what is happening with resources, what is happening with the vaccination. And because there's a lack of information or there's a lot of inaccurate information presenting itself, again, we have women impacted and their mental health jeopardized, and then their mental health needs going unmet and not necessarily considered. So that's the work that I'm doing in a nutshell, and I look forward to your questions and further comments as we continue on in the program.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Lodge. And I'm going to transition now to our second guest. Their lengthy bios were attached to your the email you received after you registered, so you can read their full information, but I'm going to highlight some of the salient excerpts from each of these bios. And I'd like to next introduce Dr. Angela Neal Barnett. Dr. Neal Barnett is a pioneer in the field of treatment and manifestation of anxiety disorders, specifically among Black Americans, and her work and research has been highly regarded and sought after, from popular psychology journals to America's largest syndicated news networks. She's also the director of the Kent State's program for research on anxiety disorders among African Americans, and a professor at Kent State as well. The mission of the research center is to transform the African American community by recognizing and responding to societal needs through education, innovation, intervention, and dissemination of anxiety-based research. She has sustained partnerships with different urban leagues, Black churches, Black hair care professionals, Black doulas, and public schools. And it's important that her research, that the different forms of her research address the different forms of anxiety that are associated with being Black in the corporate workplace. She has authored the article, How Organizations Can Support the Mental Health of Their Black Employees. And this article has been used by corporations, companies, and organizations across the country. She has said herself that designing intervention studies, disseminating research results, mentoring, encouraging, and advising current BIPOC students and early career faculty, or sharing about Black Americans and anxiety disorders on multiple levels and platforms throughout her career has shown that her purpose has never wavered. She wants to make sure that she ensures that Black Americans understand what anxiety is, how it is manifest, and that no matter what, they can reclaim their lives. So with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Angela Neal Barnett and allow her to say a few words about the work she's doing as well.
Thank you, Jolene. I'm going to share my screen. All right. And the first thing I want to say is I really do believe this, that anxiety is treatable, and regardless of your race, you can reclaim your life. This is a picture of Simone Biles, and what I'd like to ask you is, when you see Simone, what do you think? What do you see? And the bigger question for me is, when you see Black women, what do you see? When you see Black girls, what do you see? And how does what you see, what we see, affect our conceptualization of Black women and girls' mental health? And how does it affect our conceptualization of how we think we should intervene in Black women and girls' mental health? Because a lot of what people see when they look at Black women and girls are stereotypes. When you looked at Simone and you've seen her, going 7 feet in the air, tumbling, you thought, oh my goodness, this is a strong Black woman. And yet you don't see the other things. You don't see that this is a woman who, as a child, bounced back and forth in foster care until her grandparents adopted her. You don't see the woman who, along with many of her teammates, was sexually abused by the teen doctor. When we look at Black women and girls, what we tend to see for women are either strong Black women or angry Black women. And what we tend to see for little Black girls are people who we believe are older than they are, which is called adultification. So we adultify little Black girls and think they also don't need attention paid to their mental health. So to understand what I do, it's really important that we understand who Black women are. And from the time that they came into this, they entered this country, Black women's mental health has been at a premium. Remember, they entered this country as slaves. And from the very beginning, they were bought and sold like produce. They endured their children being sold away from them. They endured their partners, their husbands leaving. Since the beginning of time, Black females have experienced intergenerational trauma. It's the author, Toni Morrison, who says about Black women, and she had nothing to fall back on. Not ladyhood, not whiteness, not maleness. And in the profound desolation of the reality of her situation, she, in essence, invented herself. And much of what Black women have invented and passed down to their daughters and their granddaughters is absolutely inspiring. And other parts of it make it more difficult for us to understand mental health in Black women and to develop interventions that Dr. Lodge referred to that are culturally competent and reach them, not at the level as to what people think they are, but for who they actually are. So for Black women, for Black girls, anxiety and trauma take a toll on their mind and on our bodies and on our spirits. So what I do in essence is help Black women and girls protect their spirits. and I help them protect their spirits as it relates to anxiety. And anxiety is this perception of a future threat. You may not know when, you may not know where, but you just know something is going to happen. And that something that is going to happen is going to be very, very bad. And so when we are anxious, what happens is that we are always in this state of hypervigilance. So we're always in this state of highest alert. We are waiting for the next shoe to drop. So anxiety is a hostage taker, and it takes Black women and girls hostage in ways that are more intense and more chronic than it takes white women and girls. And trauma, which Dr. Lodge has talked about, is this exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence. And what we know is that Black females are more likely to be the victims of sexual assault than any other group in this country. The other thing we know is that trauma can happen to us directly, it can be observed, and we can see it vicariously. So all of the things that we have seen over the last 16 months related to racism as a public health crisis and related to COVID running rampant in Black communities has contributed to high anxiety and higher levels of trauma among Black women. So in our work at Prada, again, we're doing a number of things. I am a researcher, and I am what people will tell you is I am a clinical interventionist. And so what that means is I and my team develop interventions for Black women and girls, and then we test those interventions. And once we test them and find out, are they feasible? Will the community accept them? And then are they efficacious, which is like a big psychological word, because psychologists like big psychological words, which really means, does it work? Does it work? And everything that we do is with the community as our partner. So as we are developing interventions, we are developing them with Black girls. We are developing them with doulas. We are developing them with Black women's clubs. So the community is our partner, and everything is designed to be culturally competent. So a couple of things that we are doing now. Like Dr. Lodge, I also work in infant mortality, and I'm in Cleveland and Akron and Canton. And we started out with anxiety and stress with these women. And what became very clear to us very early on was that it wasn't enough. The anxiety and stress wasn't enough. What we were looking at were women who had experienced multiple traumas, and they had experienced them at a very young age, to the point where they were experiencing what is known as post-traumatic stress disorder. And so in addition to intervening with the anxiety, we found that we had also had to intervene with the post-traumatic stress disorder. And we had to do it in a way that made sense for the community. It had to be brief. And so we do something called written exposure therapy, which is very brief, 30 minutes, 5 sessions, and works very effectively. We also found that most of our mothers had never been parented. So their greatest fear was they were going to be bad parents. They didn't know how to parent. And so, working again with the community, we developed the Spirit of Motherhood parenting program. And this uses music and videos and what's known as cognitive behavioral therapy to help mothers reduce the stress of parenting and become better parents. Then with our anxiety treatment, which we have been doing for years now, we use the concept of sister circles. We have sisters offering support sister circles, which go across the lifespan for adult women. And then we have sister circles called SUN, Sisters United Now, for middle school girls. And this is 2021. And so what we have also done is we have developed apps and wearables that go with the sister circles. So for the girls, we have the SUN app. And again, the SUN app uses something called musical cognitive restructuring. So building your own theme song, because what keeps you anxious is your thoughts. And so if you can push out those thoughts and replace them with neutral or negative thoughts, that reduces your anxiety. And so we teach girls how to write their own theme song. They record it into the app, and just wonderful things happen. As we continue to work with our mothers, we realized we needed a stress reduction wearable for them. So we are in the midst of beta testing a wearable for pregnant mothers that reduces their stress and gets a lot of biomarker data as well. So not only do we find out what's going on with everyone who we work with in terms of psychologically, but we also find out what's going on in terms of what's happening in their their bodies. I think I'm going to end here, but again, what I really want to stress is if we are going to make a difference in the lives of Black women and girls, what we must do is address what is going on in their spirits and protect it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Neal Barnett. We really appreciate your sharing your research and giving us such wonderful insights. And now I'd like to introduce our final speaker for this evening, Leslie Pallett Stoyer, who is Executive Director of Nami Summit County. Nami is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and she just celebrated her 10th year as co-executive director of Nami in Summit County, which is a grassroots self-help organization formed in 1986. The mission of Nami is to improve the quality of life for families and individuals who are impacted by mental illness through support, education, and advocacy. In 2018, Nami Summit County was presented with an award of excellence at the Morgan Impact Awards dinner for exemplary leadership. Prior to relocating to Akron in the year 2000, Leslie volunteered for Nami Summit County as well as other Summit County nonprofits. Prior to that, she practiced law in Morristown, New Jersey, served as a law clerk to a Superior Court judge, and she's also a graduate of Seton Hall University School of Law. She sits on several local mental health advisory committees, including Summit County Maternal Depression Network, Summit County Mental Health Courts, and New Day Court as well. So I would like to, without further ado, turn the floor over to Leslie Pallett-Stoyer.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I am also going to share my screen. And I'm here to tell you a bit about Nami and what we do in the community. Can everybody see my screen? Is that good? Okay, awesome. Maybe doesn't want to do that. Hold on one second. Let me stop that. Go back to here. So I'm going to start out with a couple of statistics for you. And that is 1 in 5 adults in the United States experience mental illness in the average year. Now, a new statistic due probably in large part to COVID is that 1 in 3 adults are reporting experiencing symptoms of anxiety and depression. This slide is a slide of statistics based on the difference in gender and mental health disorders. And we heard Dr. Lodge and Dr. Neil Barnett talking about anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. You'll see the women column is in that blue, and then the teal is the men. And you can see for the majority of mental health diagnoses, women are at an increase. Specifically for anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, you can see the difference in the percentage of that. Impulse control disorders, substance abuse disorders tend to favor men. I am not a clinician. I am going to give that disclaimer to you both. You have some excellent speakers, and Dr. Lodge and Dr. Neil Barnett. And they can address maybe why those statistics are such, but I just thought they were pretty fascinating actually, and wanted to share those with you. So NAMI does support education and advocacy. That's our mission. And we do that in a number of different ways. So we have support meetings, and we hold weekly support meetings for family support and what's called NAMI Connection. NAMI is tends to divide up their programs based on need. So our family support is designed to help people who have a loved one with a mental health diagnosis. Their needs and their supports are going to be different from somebody that's actually experiencing the mental health diagnosis. And so that's why we kind of divide those things up into two different segments. So we hold support meetings, and they are purely drop-in basis. Actually, we're doing everything on Zoom right now. We're going to convert over to going in person again in August. But those programs are run as our education programs also by trained facilitators. And our trained facilitators are not clinicians, just as I am not a clinician, but they're people with lived experience. So NAMI very much values the lived experience that goes along with having a loved one with mental health diagnosis, or you yourself having a mental health diagnosis. We then train our support facilitators and our education facilitators. We send them to NAMI, Ohio, which is down in Columbus, and we bring in our national trainers that come from our NAMI National Arlington headquarters to come in and train. Our programs are also evidence-based, and you heard Dr. Neil Barnett talk about evidence-based, and I won't go into that unless somebody has questions, and then we'll talk about that a little bit later. But some of our education programs. So Family to Family is basically our flagship education program. It's an 8-session course. It is designed to help teach family members what their loved one who's impacted by that mental illness is going through. So we go through different diagnoses, we go through different medications, we go through the brain structure, how the brain is supposed to function, how it's not functioning properly with somebody with a diagnosis. how therapies and the medication can help in those instances. But I think the biggest and most important part of our family to family program is the coping and the communication skills that we teach in that program. How to speak with your loved one, how to communicate with your loved one, how to empathize with your loved one. We teach the LEAP technique, which is listen, empathize, agree, and partner, to help people with family struggles, with mental health diagnoses. And then we finally end with advocacy in that program and how to advocate effectively on behalf of your loved one who is impacted by that mental illness. The Nami peer-to-peer program is a program that is designed, it's a recovery-based program, and that is for the individual that has the mental illness. You remember I said that we divide things up based on need. And so it's a recovery-based program helping people to identify what best will help them on their recovery plan. What are their triggers? What are their symptoms? What do they do when those symptoms come on? What are the next steps in their own recovery plan that they should start implementing when they see those symptoms or those triggers happening? Our NAMI Basics program is a very similar program. It's based on family to family, but it's designed for caregivers of youth and adolescents that have a mental health diagnosis. Some of the different things that we get into in that program is the juvenile justice system and 504 plans and that type of thing. So helping to advocate on behalf of your child who has the behavioral diagnosis. Ending the Silence is a program where we go into the schools. It's designed to fit into a 50-minute class program. We go in and we talk to middle schoolers, high schoolers, or college level students, and we help them identify symptoms, signs of stressors, behaviors in their peers and in themselves, and then kind of direct them to where they need to get the help from. They're not the ones that have to help this individual. They can help direct them to get the help by the clinicians, the experts in the field. We also teach a very similar program in Ending the Silence to parents or caregivers, and then also to the educators themselves. And then NAMI Homefront. NAMI Homefront is a very similar course, again, to family, but it is designed as an online course offered 4 times a year through our national organization to family members who have an active duty loved one with a mental health diagnosis. So there is a necessity for anonymity when it comes to that, just because of the nature of the people that are in that field. And so we offer that again 4 times a year remotely. Then we have some programs. Well, by the way, all of those are our national programs. So we follow the national format for all of those, and we hold to the fidelity of those programs because, again, they're evidence-based. But we found a need right here in Summit County for programs for clients. Most of these are based on financial need. They hold the requirement that there is a financial need, number 1, and number 2, that the person is a resident of Summit County and that they are actively in services for a mental health condition. That first one, Creative Kids, we structured to give financial assistance to the caregivers of children or youth that have a mental health diagnosis. We saw a need for kids who were far enough along in their treatment program for those extracurriculars that go along with it. We've partnered with different facilities in Summit County. So Firefly Music School, Asian Sun, Cauga Valley Arts Center, Camp Wainoa, Perfect Balance. We've partnered with all these different facilities in Summit County to help send these kids to their extracurricular activities to help further their recovery, give them an outlet for their recovery. And a lot of times we find out that they have these talents that were not fostered until they got into the Creative Kids program. We have one young man who started out at Asian Sun about 4 years ago in the program. And by the way, you can continue to request funding going through. And so he started out like those little tykes there in the little white uniform. And he, we heard, got a letter from Mom with his last application that he's testing for his black belt in August. He's about 12, 13 years old. He's been in the program for 4 years. So, and you know, along with that, she told us about how well he's doing in his recovery, how much more confidence he has, how he's able to impose self-control over his behaviors, and how much better he's doing in school. Housewarming. Housewarming is a program that we offer. It's a one-time gift to people that are moving out from or into their own independent living for the first time. So they're either moving from, you know, living with caregivers, living in a group home, coming from incarceration, or coming from the streets, from homelessness. And we provide a one-time gift for everything that you would need to set up your dwelling for the very first time, all brand new stuff. And the only thing that we don't offer up is furniture, but all the bedding, all the cookware, glassware, eating utensils, that type of thing, runs us about between $200 and $250 per package. But it is something that is much needed in the community for them to set up their own home, and the pride that goes along with it, with brand new stuff. We started out with donations, but found out it was really valued by our board that people have brand new things. For some people, it's the first time they've ever had brand new things. We also provide one time a year shoes. We partner up with Skechers. Skechers brings a truck out from their corporate program, and we provide shoes one time a year. A lot of people that are living with severe, persistent mental illness don't have you know, regular cars for the transportation or whatever. They walk a lot of places, take the bus, and we find they go through shoes pretty quickly. So we provide that service, and you know, they come in, they pick out the shoe and the style and the size that they'd like, and Nami pays the bill for that. Hair care once every 8 weeks. You can we go through case management, and the case managers will take their clients to either the Akron Barber College or the Beyond Expectation Barber College here in Akron, and they can get grooming services, hairstyle, haircut, shave, that type of thing. And then Client Activity and Socialization Fund. This is where we provide funding for group home parties, for holiday parties, for holiday gifts. A lot of times people don't have the family support and the family to surround them and give them you know, just make things special for them. And so we provide funding for that. In this particular picture, a gentleman in the back with the black t-shirt on, the ball cap on, he's a group home operator, and he came down to me and asked for funding to take his guys to Cedar Point for a trip to Cedar Point. He said, I can get them there, I can supervise them when they're there, but the tickets are really expensive. Can Nami pitch in? And we did. And so he took that picture for us, and those are the people that he took there, and he said that they felt like they were, you know, went on a trip to Disney World. And so then we finished up with advocacy. Remember, it's a three-prong approach: support, education, and advocacy. And advocacy we do on 3 levels. We do it on our national level. And usually that involves our national organization asking us to rally the troops for a particular piece of legislation that's coming out. One of the recent ones that we did was for the 988 number. If you don't know, in June of 2022, we're going to be implementing, the entire country is, the 988 number for mental health emergencies. It's going to be in place of the 911 number that we call for 911. For a regular emergency, this will be a 998 number. It's going to also replace the suicide hotline number, which is right now a 10-digit number. that I can't even remember. And I've been doing this for 10 years now. So that 988 number is going to be real helpful, I think, to people, especially, if you're in a crisis situation and you're stressed and you've got to remember, what's that suicide hotline number again? And then Nami, Nami, Ohio usually does the same type of thing. They call upon us to kind of rally the troops for legislation. And one of the big ones that we did, it was quite a while ago now, when the Affordable Care Act was being implemented. The states had the ability to select whether or not they were going to do Medicaid expansion or not. And we, boy, did we do a blitz on our local legislators about, we wanted Medicaid expansion here in Ohio because we realized that the impact on people living with mental illness, from the poverty rate on up to a living wage, and people who couldn't get the help that they needed because they couldn't afford insurance, and we were successful in doing that. And then on a local level, I know I'm talking real fast, but I know I'm limited in time, but on a local level, we help direct people to the resources here in Summit County. We have a great Summit County base of agencies, mental health agencies. But a lot of times when people are coming from a crisis situation, they don't know where to go. They don't know where to seek help from. So we can help direct people and help guide them. And then, of course, hopefully get them involved in some of our education and support programs too, so that they can better help their loved one. And then everything that we do here in the community, I just want to add this in real quickly, is free of charge. All of those programs I just mentioned, we operate on $230,000 budget a year. We are a local nonprofit 501c3. We rely on grants and donations, but our biggest fundraiser of the year is our Nami walks, which this year will be on October 16th. We're going to do an in-person and also a virtual walk if people aren't comfortable getting together, but we will be at the University of Akron this year on October the 16th. It's a Saturday, and that's where we're hoping to raise $105,000 for our mission and our operating budget. And then we usually bring in a monthly or an annual speaker too. We have Chris Hubbard lined up, and he is a player for the Cleveland Browns, and he's had his own struggle with mental health condition, and we'll be speaking on that, strength over silence. And that's all I have for you, and I am going to take my screen off here. Let's see here so I can see everybody online, and that's all I have for you, but thank you so much for allowing me to come in, and certainly follow the prestige of Dr. Lodge and Dr. Neil Barnett. And we value what both of you do in the community too, very much so. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all the work you do with Nami and for sharing your amazing programs with us. So time-wise, we're really kind of coming to the end of our time together. We actually don't have any questions in the chat at the moment. No one's put anything in the chat, but I think that our guests have been, now we do have a question. So I'll address the question very quickly. But do want to note that our time is sort of the hour that we set aside for this event. So if you need to leave, we understand that. But I do want to at least give a brief opportunity for these questions. A question for Leslie: what is the emergency number? So I think that if you can post that in the chat so that everyone can see it. I believe it was 998. Dr. Lodge, how do you tell people to find therapists skilled enough that are specific to each client's needs? And thank you for all your work.
That's a great question. One thing that I recommend is, again, just how we look around and research who we want our medical providers to be, that same approach should be taken with mental health professionals. And you want to be able to ask questions about how do they see certain things that are happening that you experience? So for example, especially for people of color, African Americans in particular, if you experience any form of oppression, whether that's racism, sexism, classism, heterosexism. You want to be able to ask questions about what is your therapist's thoughts or views or treatment approach or theory as it relates to how do they see mental health, and then what is their approach. And given that conversation within the first 5 minutes or so, you will know if that's a good fit for you or not. So I think, and I don't want to say an interview, but definitely having a conversation and asking questions about their approach and how do they see mental health, in particular mental health related to whatever your demographics are. And then understanding if they are able to match what your needs, or if you'll feel safe with being open and sharing the experiences that you have, and not have to worry about being invalidated or having some of those concerns minimized. So you interview just like you would shop around or search around for a dentist or a primary care provider. You should take that same approach with mental health.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Neil Barnett, the question to you is, how did you pick your field?
Well, originally I wanted to be Nancy Drew, but I wasn't blonde. And at the time I didn't know what a roadster was. And so when I was in like middle school, we had to pick a career, and we did it to show you how old I am. There were little boxes, there were SRA boxes. You had to read and think about what you wanted to do. And I said, I want to be a psychologist. And I thought I was going to be a therapist. I thought I was going to be the type of psychologist who saw clients and had a private practice or worked in the clinic or worked in the clinic. But to be a psychologist, you have to do something called an internship. And I did my internship at one of the top places in the country. And at the time, anxiety disorders were really new. And so all of the leading anxiety disorders expert of the day came in, and they did this little conference and all that. And they talked about anxiety, but they never talked about anxiety in Black Americans. And so I raised my hand and I said, what about anxiety in Black children? And the leading expert of the day said, we think Black kids' fears are the same as white kids' fears, except that Black kids are more likely to be afraid of things like rats and roaches. And I was just absolutely livid that somebody with a PhD could sit up and say something like that. And my advisor, my mentor at the time, was a very slow talking Southern Black male. And he said, Angela, you can either get mad or you can do the research. And from that day forward, I've done the research.
Thank you very much for sharing that. So in the chat, we have shared several upcoming events that are coming from both Women's Network and Athena Akron. The Q&A with a notable leader is Dolores Presley coming up next week. Women of Achievement networking reception in person, and the Women of Achievement Awards, which is virtual. And the links to all those events are in the chat. Leslie Sawyer has put in the emergency numbers as requested. It's 988. So if you want to remember, like 911, 988, that will be in effect next June. And the 800 number, 800-273-8255. We have several other thank yous in the chat. It says to me that maybe we have to do something to continue this conversation. It's been amazing. We will regroup and reframe, and perhaps see if there's a way to have our guests share with us again in the future, since they've had such a rich amount of information to share, and and everything. So I don't think we have had any last questions for them. And I want to be respectful of time. Thank you all for sticking with us an extra few minutes. And with that, I'm going to let Jan sort of give the proverbial benediction.
So I just want to say the word that comes to mind when I sit and listen to Leslie and Angela and Dr. Lodge is you're trailblazers. Thank you for what you're doing. I love hearing just your take on things that we don't necessarily hear out there in mainstream in the public, but talking about the way you are able to do research and work with the communities and make an impact. I just want you to know that you're our heroes tonight. I mean, this has obviously been a great topic for us, and keep on blazing the trails that you are, because we really need it and we appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Please join us. Our next installment of State of the Women's Community will be on women's health. The date is not yet confirmed, but it will be during the last week of August. So please watch your inboxes, and we will be sending you information about that as well. And with that, you're welcome to unmute yourselves and applaud our guests, or use your reactions to applaud them silently. We want to thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for sharing with us, and best of luck as you continue your work, and thank you for all the work you do. Thank you for the rest of you for joining us this evening. And with that, we'd like to say goodbye.
Bye.